Admiral Torres's voice cuts across the command frequency one last time. The channel is clear, his tone devoid of triumph or anger. It is the flat procedural voice of an executioner reading a sentence. The transmission carries the full text of the surrender terms. They are not open for negotiation. They are a statement of fact, the new reality imposed upon the Vorak Empire. The battle is over. The discussion of its consequences begins. The Vorak Empire must accept the complete and total dismantlement of its military. Every warship from the largest dreadnought to the smallest scout will be powered down. Their weapon systems will be disarmed. Their engines will be locked. Their communication arrays will be placed under external control. The vast network of military bases that span their territory, the shipyards that built the invasion fleet, the training facilities that produced its soldiers, all will be decommissioned. Human and Kepler oversight teams will supervise the process, ensuring no weapon, no vessel, no piece of strategic hardware remains operational. The civilian population will not be punished for the actions of its leadership. They will be relocated from their current homeworlds to a series of designated protected zones. These territories will be secured and monitored, but they will be self-governing under the new galactic statutes. The purpose is to break the cycle of imperial expansion, to remove the Vorak people from the strategic centers of power they use to dominate others. It is not imprisonment. It is a forced reboot of their society, a containment meant to allow for a new culture to emerge. All territorial claims made by the Vorak Empire are declared void, effective immediately. The star systems they conquered, the resources they seized, the space lanes they controlled, none of it belongs to them anymore. The maps of known space are being redrawn, and the Vorak name has been removed as an owner. They are tenants now. Their presence in the galaxy permitted only under the terms set by the victors. Their empire as a political and territorial entity ceases to exist. The leadership caste faces a different fate. General Krex, his admirals, the members of the Command Council, and the political architects of the Empire's expansionist policies will stand trial. They will be tried for crimes against other species, a legal concept that did not exist in Vorak law. The proceedings will be conducted by a multi-species tribunal, with evidence drawn from the soon-to-be-opened Imperial archives. The goal is not revenge but accountability. It is to establish a permanent record of the cost of their ambition. The choice presented is stark and binary. Acceptance of these terms means survival, however diminished. Resistance means the complete and immediate annihilation of all remaining Vorak forces. There will be no second battle, no last stand. The human and Kepler fleets have firing solutions on every surviving ship. Their weapons are charged. Any attempt to power weapons, to maneuver aggressively, or to initiate a self-destruct sequence will be interpreted as a refusal to surrender. The response will be a single, coordinated volley that will vaporize the entire armada. The time for combat is over. The time for compliance has begun. General Krex stands on his bridge, surrounded by the silent, anxious faces of his officers. The tactical display shows his fleet surrounded, outgunned and outmaneuvered. The confident lines of his invasion plan are gone, replaced by the blinking red icons of his own shattered forces. He listens to the terms, each clause a hammer blow to the legacy he helped build. He thinks of the century of preparation, the vast resources spent, the certainty of victory that filled this very room hours before. He looks at the faces of his crew, young soldiers who followed their orders, who believed in the Empire's destiny. To order them to fight now would not be courage. It would be a final, selfish act of murder. He picks up the command transmitter. His voice, once an instrument of absolute authority, is heavy and slow. He issues the order fleet-wide. All ships are to power down. All weapons are to be safetied. All crews are to stand down and await boarding parties. The fight is over. The Vorak Empire, a civilization that ruled for 1,000 years through fear and conquest, ends not with a prolonged war or a glorious last charge. It ends in the silent void, with a simple command to surrender, 6 minutes after the first shot was fired. The Kepler Collective makes its formal introduction to humanity. It is not a meeting of two species, but the unveiling of an entire community. They reveal the existence of the Galactic Council, a governing body composed of over 300 intelligent species that has watched the Vorak Empire's expansion with growing concern for centuries. They remained hidden, observing, their civilizations protected by technologies that rendered them invisible to Vorak detection methods. Humanity's decisive action, its use of power not for conquest but to end a threat, serves as its immediate and unanimous invitation to join. There is no probation, no vetting process. Earth assumes a seat at the table as a full member. Its philosophy and actions having already met the Council's core requirement, a commitment to peaceful coexistence and mutual benefit. The terms for the Vorak people are vastly different. They are offered probationary status, a conditional membership contingent on a complete and verifiable transformation. They must dismantle the cultural and political structures of their empire and prove they have abandoned conquest as a method of interaction. The Council's membership represents a direct reversal of Vorak dominance. It is largely composed of civilizations that were previously oppressed, enslaved, or driven into hiding by Vorak expansion. Their votes on Vorak probation will be weighed against a long history of suffering. The Vorak must now earn a place in an order they once sought to rule. Earth's strategic approach becomes the new operational standard. Its philosophy of using military strength to create the conditions for peace, rather than to enforce domination through fear, is adopted as the Council's guiding principle. This represents a fundamental shift in galactic governance. The model moves from one based on conquest and resource extraction to one built on cooperation and shared scientific advancement. Power is no longer measured by the size of a fleet, but by the strength of one's alliances and contributions to the common good. A key pillar of the old Vorak order collapses. Their empire maintained control through a monopoly on hyperspace travel, controlling the ancient natural corridors that connected star systems. Humanity's hybrid FTL technology, developed with Kepler science, renders those corridors obsolete. The new drives do not rely on fixed routes. They can transition directly between points in space. This technology is not hoarded. It is shared freely with all Council members, democratizing interstellar travel and breaking the economic and military stranglehold the Vorak held over the galaxy for a millennium. Trade, exploration, and communication become accessible to all, not just the Empire. This shift creates immediate tension within the Vorak leadership. The older generation, the architects of the imperial system, struggled to accept their new reality. Their identity was built on concepts of inherent superiority and the right to rule. To see their technology surpassed, their territory redistributed, and their philosophy rejected is a psychological blow from which many cannot recover. They face the dismantling of their life's work and the erasure of their legacy, forced to live under the governance of those they once considered inferior. In the power vacuum left by the Empire's fall, former slave worlds and protectorates face a choice. They do not declare immediate independence. Instead, they petition the Terran Federation for protection and integration. They have lived for generations under the boot of a single galactic power and have no desire to face the galaxy alone, vulnerable to whatever might emerge next. They choose the security of a cooperative network over the uncertainty of isolation. They seek membership in the system humanity built, trusting its promise of mutual defense and shared prosperity over the frail hope of going it alone. A new galactic architecture solidifies. It is not an empire with a single capital and a rigid hierarchy. It is a sprawling, interconnected web of systems, a cooperative network with the Terran Federation and the Galactic Council at its organizational heart. Membership is voluntary, based on adherence to a common set of laws that prioritize knowledge sharing over resource extraction and mutual protection over territorial aggression. This new order, born from the utter defeat of the old, offers a stability the galaxy has not known since before the Vorak Empire began its expansion. The age of the solitary dominant power is over. The age of the alliance has begun. The Vorak Empire spent a century preparing to invade Earth, assembling 300 warships and 3 million warriors. They believed humanity's primitive technology would make conquest effortless. But in just 6 minutes, their entire armada was destroyed. How did Earth turn their surveillance against them? What secret defenses had humanity been building for 78 years? This is the story of how patience and intelligence defeated brute force. General Krex stands before the war room hologram, the invasion plan glowing with crisp, efficient lines of movement. His voice echoes through the chamber, precise and unwavering. He presents the culmination of 100 years of analysis and wargaming, a textbook conquest strategy refined through thousands of simulations. The direct assault vector, the orbital blockade patterns, the atmospheric insertion protocols, Each component is a testament to Vorak military doctrine, a perfect machine built for a single purpose. Across the star chart, intelligence markers highlight Earth's disunity. The planet remains fractured into competing political factions, its technological development uneven and sluggish. Their most advanced spacecraft are fragile orbital platforms, their weapon systems reliant on chemical propellants and primitive guidance. There is no unified planetary defense grid, no coordinated military doctrine that could challenge a fleet of this magnitude. The officers around the table exchange nods of approval, their confidence a tangible force in the room. This armada represents the single greatest military expenditure in the Empire's history. 300 warships, from swift interceptors to city-sized dreadnoughts, cast long shadows against the stars. Their construction consumed resources from a dozen conquered systems, their crews drawn from the finest military academies. It is a force designed not just for victory, but for overwhelming instantaneous domination. The simulations agree. Every conceivable variable has been accounted for, every potential human response modeled and countered. Commander Thiel gestures toward a data stream detailing the last 50 years of human technological development. The graphs are flat, the progress stagnant. Energy output shows minimal increases. Materials science appears stalled, and their spacefaring capability remains confined to their own moon. He suggests this technological plateau is unnatural, a possible sign of hidden development. A senior officer scoffs, waving a dismissive hand. The humans lack the vision for such deception. Their petty conflicts consume their focus. Thiel's concern is logged and filed away, an anomaly not worth delaying the operation. With the final authorization given, the fleet engages its transition drives. Space twists and tears as 300 vessels surge forward, crossing the void toward the Sol system. On the command bridge, General Krex watches the starfield shift, the yellow sun growing from a point of light to a distinct disk. Sensor sweeps begin their initial passive scan, searching for the expected sparse network of orbital junk and primitive satellites. The crews are at battle stations, but the mood is professional, almost relaxed. They expect to meet scattered resistance, to see panicked transmissions, to watch outdated human fighters scramble in disorganized, futile waves. The invasion begins not with tension, but with the calm certainty of a predestined outcome. They approach the orbit of Neptune, a perfect formation, poised to strike. A Vorak scout ship malfunctions during a routine surveillance pass, its stealth systems failing catastrophically during atmospheric entry. It crashes in a remote desert region, a crumpled wreck of advanced alloys and sparking circuitry. Human military units secure the site within hours, their crude vehicles and equipment a stark contrast to the silent, shimmering craft. They recover the bodies of its crew and the ship's mostly intact core systems, transporting everything to a secured research facility under a blanket of absolute secrecy. This single event, this operational error the Vorak command will never know about, changes the entire equation. Earth's top scientists, pulled from disparate nations under the guise of a joint research initiative, assemble around the debris. They work in isolated laboratories, cut off from the outside world, their findings compartmentalized and classified at the highest level. They are confronted with technology that defies their understanding of physics, energy sources that seem to draw power from subspace, materials with molecular structures unlike anything found in nature, and computational systems operating on biological processing principles. The work is slow, painstaking, and fraught with danger as they learn to handle systems never meant for human interaction. Within 5 years, the first successful reverse engineering projects come online. Teams decipher the principles behind the Vorak power core, replicating a stable, scaled-down version that produces clean, immense energy. They crack the encryption on the ship's data logs, granting access to a treasure trove of technical schematics, tactical manuals, and astrometric charts. The humans now possess the Vorak Empire's complete technological playbook, from shield harmonic frequencies to weapons yield specifications. They know the enemy's capabilities down to the smallest detail. A decade after the crash, prototype weapons based on Vorak design are being tested in underground ranges and orbital platforms. Energy projectors that fire focused particle beams, personal armor that can deflect high-caliber rounds, and sensor arrays capable of tracking objects across the solar system with pinpoint accuracy. Each breakthrough is integrated into a new unified global defense strategy. The fractured nations, faced with an existential threat they now fully comprehend, begin pooling resources and expertise on an unprecedented scale. The project becomes known only by a coded designation, a hidden war effort unfolding in plain sight. The Vorak, meanwhile, continue their century-long observation. Their stealth probes slip through the solar system, scanning communications and monitoring industrial output. They see the public-facing technological stagnation and interpret it as confirmation of their superiority. They note the political conflicts and see disunity. Their intelligence reports, based on these superficial scans, assure the Command Council that their technological edge remains absolute and utterly secret. The loss of the scout ship is recorded as a navigation accident in deep space, its fate unknown. The assumption of human ignorance becomes their greatest vulnerability. This gives humanity 78 years. 78 years to study every aspect of Vorak technology and society. 78 years to design and build countermeasures for every weapon system, every ship class, every documented tactical doctrine. They know the precise frequency bands Vorak shields operate on, the optimal range of their plasma batteries, the sensor blind spots of their scouts. The Vorak technological advantage, instead of being an impenetrable wall, becomes a set of predictable variables in a complex equation. Earth's defense is no longer a desperate gamble. It is a calculated reaction, a trap decades in the making, waiting for its moment to spring. The Vorak fleet cuts its transition drives at the edge of the Sol system, its sensors sweeping forward in wide, confident arcs. They expect to map a handful of primitive orbital platforms, a few lunar outposts, and the predictable chaos of Earth's near-space traffic. Instead, their displays flood with anomalous energy readings. Technical Officer Nix reports the data, his voice tight with confusion. The systems flag signatures that defy all prior intelligence. Where their models predicted empty void or simple human satellites, they find structured power emissions and complex orbital infrastructure. Around Mars, a network of defensive platforms hangs in high orbit, their silhouettes angular and purposeful. Below them, the red planet's surface shows clusters of massive domed cities, their translucent covers shimmering under artificial suns. Vast greenhouse arrays and industrial complexes sprawl across the plains, connected by elevated transit tubes. The scale of the construction suggests a thriving, advanced colony, not a fledgling outpost. This is not the barren rock from the intelligence briefings. This is a developed world. The readings from Venus are even more confounding. The hellish atmosphere, which should be an impenetrable barrier, now shows massive processing stations floating in the upper cloud layers. These installations siphon the toxic air, breaking it down into component gases with a terrifying efficiency. Their energy signatures pulse with a strength that matches Vorak industrial output. They are not science stations. They are resource extraction and manufacturing hubs on a planetary scale, operating in an environment the Vorak had written off as uninhabitable. As the sensor sweep reaches the gas giants, the data becomes impossible to reconcile. Jupiter's orbital space is dense with installations, shipyards, research stations, and what appear to be massive power collection arrays tapping into the planet's magnetic field. The scan analysis software estimates the age of the largest structures. The results cause a ripple of disbelief through the command deck. The core support frames and primary docking rings show weathering and micro-impact patterns consistent with decades of continuous operation. Some of these facilities were already under construction when the Vorak were running their earliest simulations of this invasion. The remaining Vorak capital ships lock their primary batteries on the human orbital platforms. Massive plasma projectors charge, drawing energy from the cores of the great warships. They fire. Globes of superheated matter streak across the void, on trajectories calculated to vaporize the defensive stations. These are the same weapons that shattered planetary defenses across a dozen conquered systems. The projectiles cross the distance in seconds, impacting the invisible barrier of Earth's defensive screens. They do not explode. They are absorbed. The energy does not dissipate. The human shield technology does not block or deflect. It accepts the incoming force, analyzes its composition and trajectory in nanoseconds, and reconfigures it. The shield matrices act like a complex series of lenses and mirrors, bending the raw energy, refining it, and assigning it a new purpose. What went in as a randomized plasma burst emerges as a focused, coherent beam of amplified destruction. The process is instantaneous and flawless. These reconfigured energy beams lance back across space. They do not target the platforms they came from. They strike the Vorak formation. A battleship that just fired its main battery watches its own projectile, now transformed into a precise cutting beam, slice through its forward armor. The beam pierces the primary magazine. The resulting detonation tears the ship in half. Another cruiser takes a direct hit from its own amplified plasma charge, the force multiplied beyond its design tolerance. Its shield generators overload and fail, leaving it a helpless target. The Vorak battle computers attempt to process the phenomenon. They run frantic calculations trying to predict the redirection vectors, to find a firing solution that the human systems cannot counter. The algorithms fail. The human defense does not follow a predictable pattern of reflection. It uses an adaptive learning system, one that analyzes each attack and creates a unique optimal response. The computers cannot find a solution because the solution changes with every single shot fired. They report the problem as mathematically insoluble with current tactical models. A command dreadnought, the flagship of a battle group, unleashes a full broadside from its port batteries. 16 plasma projectiles race toward a cluster of human platforms. A moment later, 16 refined energy beams return. They strike the dreadnought simultaneously at key structural points identified by the human targeting systems. The massive warship, designed to withstand a sustained siege, buckles under the coordinated onslaught of its own firepower. It breaks apart, its death witnessed by the entire fleet. The Vorak crews realize the truth with dawning horror. They are not just failing to damage the enemy, they are actively destroying themselves. On the command bridge of the surviving ships, the order is given: weapons freeze. All offensive systems are to power down immediately. The directive goes out across the entire fleet. The logic is inescapable. Every shot they fire is captured, perfected, and thrown back at them with greater force and accuracy. Their offensive capability has been transformed into their greatest vulnerability. To continue firing is suicide. The Armada, a force built for conquest, is now effectively disarmed. They float in the silent void, surrounded by the wreckage of their own making, their guns silent and their strategies rendered useless. The initiative has been completely and irrevocably lost. Small hatches on the far side of Earth's moon slide open, revealing launch bays carved deep into the lunar rock. These are not surface installations. They are hidden bases, their construction masked by decades of careful orbital disguise and signal suppression. From these concealed positions, waves of human fighter craft launch. They do not follow ballistic arcs or use conventional thrust. Their movements are sharp, instantaneous. They phase shift. The fighters do not approach the Vorak fleet from the outside. They appear directly within the Vorak formation. One moment, there is empty space between two heavy cruisers. The next, a trio of angular human craft materializes, their surfaces rippling with the residual energy of a dimensional transition. They phase directly through the layered energy shields of the Vorak ships, bypassing the defensive screens as if they do not exist. They ignore hull armor and bulkheads, passing through solid matter to reappear in hangar bays, engine rooms, and command decks. Vorak targeting systems scramble to acquire a lock. Sensors detect an energy spike, but before the computers can process the location, the signal vanishes and reappears 2 kilometers away. The tracking algorithms, designed for objects moving in predictable Newtonian paths, cannot compute the instantaneous jumps. The fighters flicker in and out of reality, their movements a series of disconnected snapshots that form no coherent pattern. The target acquisition consoles on the Vorak ships flash a constant stream of errors. The systems overwhelmed by data that violates every rule of physics and combat protocol they know. Each human fighter has a specific mission profile. They phase into position near critical systems: weapon battery control nodes, shield generator conduits, primary communications arrays. They do not engage in dogfights. They deliver precise surgical strikes. Micromissiles or focused energy beams disable a plasma cannon's firing mechanism. A quick burst of ionized particles fries the control circuits for a point defense network. Then, before the Vorak crew can even identify the threat, the fighter phases out, leaving a critical system offline and a compartment filled with confusion and smoke. To the Vorak, the combat maneuvers are incomprehensible. Ships are attacked from the inside. A fighter materializes in a main engine chamber, disables the primary thruster controls, and vanishes. Another appears directly in front of a bridge viewport, fires a single shot that cracks the transparent aluminum, and is gone before the security team can raise their weapons. The established doctrines of fleet engagement, maintaining formation, overlapping fields of fire, coordinated maneuver, are useless. The enemy does not respect the boundaries of space, matter, or tactical expectation. The tightly organized Vorak battle groups begin to fracture. A cruiser, its weapons suddenly silenced, turns sharply to avoid a collision with a fighter that is no longer there, instead drifting into the path of a friendly destroyer. A carrier, its launch bays disabled by internal attacks, becomes a drifting hazard. The careful cohesion of the fleet dissolves into a chaotic, uncontrolled scramble. Command channels jam with panicked, overlapping reports of attacks from all directions, from inside their own ships. No one knows where the next threat will appear. The concept of a front line ceases to exist. The battle is everywhere at once. A wing commander tries to rally his interceptors, but his orders are cut off as a human craft phases through the roof of his cockpit, disables his communications array with a precise energy burst, and vanishes. The loss of centralized command is rapid and total. Squadron leaders act on instinct, often making situations worse. The invasion force, a single coordinated entity moments before, shatters into hundreds of isolated, panicked vessels. The Vorak tactical databases are searched frantically for a response. The files on unconventional warfare, on spatial anomalies, on theoretical physics are all consulted. There is no entry for phase shift technology. There is no doctrine for an enemy that can move through solid matter. There are no countermeasures for a threat that ignores the fundamental rules of engagement. The databases return the same result for every query: no data available. The century of planning contained nothing to prepare them for this. The command and control capability of the invasion force collapses. Orders from the flagship are no longer heard or are ignored in the panic. Ships operate on isolated internal networks, blind to the rest of the fleet. The sophisticated battle management system, designed to coordinate 300 warships as a single weapon, falls silent. The Vorak Armada is no longer a military force. It is a collection of individual ships, each alone, each under attack from an enemy they cannot see, understand, or stop. Every anomaly shares one terrifying characteristic. The energy signatures match or exceed Vorak technology. The power curves, shield harmonics, and communication frequencies are different in design, but equal in capability. Officer Nix cross-references the sensor data with the Empire's master tactical database. The system returns 0 matches. These are not just unknown installations. They represent an entire technological paradigm. Absent from every intelligence report gathered over the last century, the fleet's navigational plot, which showed a clean run to a single vulnerable planet, now looks like a suicide plunge into a fortified hive. The Vorak Armada is not approaching a backwater world. They are entering a developed solar system, a multi-planet civilization that has been expanding in silence. Earth is not alone. It is the capital of a network that spans from the inner rocky planets to the gas giant frontiers. The invasion plan, built around a single thrust at a single target, is instantly obsolete. The threats can now come from any direction, from the shipyards of Jupiter, the defense grids of Mars, or the industrial might of Venus. The Vorak formation, once a blade poised to strike, now feels exposed, surrounded on all sides by an enemy whose true size and strength they had completely failed to see. A voice cuts across the Vorak command channel. It speaks in flawless High Vorak, the dialect reserved for Imperial command staff. The tone is calm, flat, authoritative. It identifies itself as Admiral Torres of the Terran Defense Command. The transmission originates from a point near Earth, but it bypasses all Vorak communication security protocols as if they do not exist. It is not a broadcast. It is a direct targeted intrusion into the command network of General Krex's flagship. Admiral Torres does not issue a challenge or a plea. He states facts. He provides the precise coordinates of the Vorak fleet's intended orbital insertion point above Earth. He lists the exact order of battle for the first wave, naming each ship class and its designated target. He details the planned timing for the initial bombardment, down to the second. He knows the invasion schedule better than some of the junior officers executing it. Every assumption of surprise, every calculation based on catching humanity unprepared, evaporates in the clarity of his words. He explains how. He reveals intercepted transmission logs dating back 80 years. He cites specific dates and mission codes for Vorak spy probes the Empire believed had operated with perfect stealth. He describes their flight paths, their sensor sweeps, and even the technical specifications of their cloaking systems. He mentions the names of Vorak intelligence analysts who authored the flawed reports on human technological stagnation. There is no boast in his voice. It is a clinical recitation of failure, a post-mortem delivered before the patient has even died. Humanity did not just detect these probes. They monitored them. They tracked every data burst sent back to the Empire. They decoded the encryption protocols and built a comprehensive library of Vorak strategic thought. The invasion plan itself was not a secret discovered at the last moment. It was a document they watched being drafted, revised, and finalized over decades of intercepted communications between the High Command and its strategic planners. They studied the tactics, the fleet formations, the command structure. They knew the personalities of the admirals, the performance specs of the ships, the doctrinal weaknesses embedded in Vorak military thinking. General Krex listens, his hand resting on the tactical console. The confidence that filled the war room is gone, replaced by a cold, sinking comprehension. This is not an invasion. An invasion implies two forces meeting with uncertain outcomes. This is a demonstration. This is a predator walking into a cage it did not see being built around it. The hidden colonies, the advanced technology, the precise knowledge of his every move, it all coalesces into a single, horrifying reality. The humans are not preparing to defend themselves. They are preparing to illustrate a lesson. Earth shifts in their perception from a target to an authority. Admiral Torres speaks not as a defender pleading for mercy, but as a warden stating the rules of a confinement that has already begun. The transmission is not a warning to turn back. It is a statement of control. The Terran Defense Command is announcing that it holds dominance over the situation, that it has dictated the terms of this engagement since before the first Vorak ship left its dock. The bridge crew falls silent. Officers look up from their stations, their training useless against this psychological assault. They understand now. The sensor ghosts around Mars and Jupiter are not just defenses. They are elements of the trap. The fleet is not approaching a battle. It is completing its final maneuver into a kill box that was designed a lifetime ago. The humans have not just prepared for this day. They have orchestrated it. Every ship, every weapon, every warrior is exactly where the Terran Defense Command wants them to be. On General Krex's order, the Vorak fleet activates its defensive screens. A shimmering blue energy field envelops each warship, the standard first-layer defense proven across 100 campaigns. Across the fleet, shield indicators glow steady green, a comforting sign of impenetrable security. Simultaneously, a network of human orbital platforms powers up. Their activation is silent, coordinated. There are no roaring engines or dramatic flares, just a cold, precise hum that registers on Vorak sensors as a sharp spike in energy output. The human weapons fire. They are not projectile launchers or explosive missiles. They emit a sustained, coherent beam of concentrated energy. A stark white line cutting through the void. The first beam strikes a Vorak frigate's shields. The sophisticated energy dispersion matrix designed to absorb and redirect the immense force of plasma impacts does nothing. The beam does not splash or diffuse. It pierces the defensive field like a needle through cloth, maintaining its perfect focus. The shield generators overload and explode a microsecond before the beam slices into the ship's primary hull. Every human weapon is tuned to a specific frequency. They are not firing blindly. They are targeting the exact resonant harmonic that destabilizes Vorak shield technology, a vulnerability documented in the recovered scout ship's engineering logs 78 years earlier. The humans did not just copy the technology. They reverse-engineered its fundamental weaknesses and built a system designed to exploit them with surgical efficiency. A Vorak heavy cruiser, its armor plating designed to withstand direct hits from capital ship batteries, takes a beam amidships. The focused energy does not explode on the surface. It bores through the meters-thick composite alloy, vaporizing everything in its path. Internal compartments are breached, atmosphere and debris erupting into space. Secondary explosions ripple through the vessel's length as power conduits and munition stores are hit. The massive warship, a symbol of imperial might, breaks apart in a series of silent flashes. The entire process takes less than 4 seconds. Across the Vorak formation, the same event repeats. Ships vanish from the tactical display, their transponder signals cutting to static. Distress calls flood the command channel, frantic reports of shields failing instantaneously, of hulls being torn open by weapons that should not exist. The fleet's automated emergency systems attempt to respond. They cycle through shield frequency modulations, trying to find a setting the human beams cannot penetrate. Each new frequency is matched and overcome before the systems can complete the cycle. The countermeasures are useless against an enemy that knows every possible permutation. The initial human volley lasts 12 seconds. In that time, 93 Vorak vessels are destroyed. The fleet's formation, once a tightly organized spearhead, is now a scattered field of wreckage and drifting debris. The scale of the loss is incomprehensible. The core assumption of the entire invasion, that Vorak technology was generations ahead of humanity's, is not just wrong. It is catastrophically, fatally wrong. Their greatest strength has been transformed into their most critical weakness. The confidence of the command bridge shatters, replaced by the cold realization that their tactical playbook is obsolete, and their enemy holds every advantage. New sensor alarms echo across the Vorak command bridge, their tone deeper and more urgent than the warnings from the inner system. The sources are not from ahead near Earth. They bloom from the dark, from the orbital lanes of Neptune and the Kuiper Belt. Massive energy signatures, not the tight beams of weapons fire, but the powerful, stable outputs of high-yield drive cores. Dozens of them, then hundreds. The Vorak tactical display, already crowded with threats, now fills with a new wave of contacts emerging from the outer solar system. These are not the defensive platforms around the inner planets. These are ships. A fleet. They transit into the battle zone not with the hesitant probes of a hidden force, but with the confident, direct vectors of a navy taking up pre-assigned positions. Their drive signatures are clean and powerful, indicating advanced propulsion systems that the Vorak intelligence database has no record of. The ships themselves are a shock. The lead vessels are Leviathans, their silhouettes longer and more mass-heavy than the largest Vorak dreadnought. They are not built for system defense. Their designs speak of long-range capability, of endurance, of firepower meant for expeditionary campaigns far from home. These are not the last-minute reinforcements of a desperate world. The scanned energy signatures tell a different story. The power curves are steady, the systems fully integrated and battle-ready. Their hull compositions show the micro-pitting and subtle weathering of long-term deep space deployment. These ships have been on station for years, perhaps decades, holding positions in the cold dark beyond the system's periphery, waiting. They are the hidden reserve, the strategic depth the Vorak never imagined. They move into a textbook englobement pattern. Squadrons of fast cruisers flank the Vorak formation, while the massive capital ships establish a blocking position between the invasion force and the exit vector back to the edge of the system. Their maneuvers are precise, coordinated, and executed with a calm efficiency that suggests this is a drill they have practiced countless times. This is not a panicked response. It is the final phase of a long-prepared operational plan. Admiral Torres's voice returns to the command channel. His tone remains flat, informative. He confirms the purpose of these new vessels. They are not just defenders of Sol. They are the guarantee for humanity's extrasolar colonies. He lists names of star systems, worlds the Vorak believed were uninhabited or held only minor research outposts. Each name is a stake through the heart of Vorak strategic thinking. Humanity has not been confined to one star. They have been expanding, planting flags and building communities on other worlds, all while the Vorak watched a decoy planet they believed was the whole of human civilization. This revelation redefines the entire conflict. The invasion force is not at the gates of a single fortified world. It is deep inside the territory of a multi-system power. The resources, the industrial capacity, the population base, every calculation the Vorak made about the scale of their enemy is wrong by orders of magnitude. The 300 ships of the invasion armada, which seemed an overwhelming force against a single planet, now appear hopelessly outmatched against a civilization that commands multiple stars. The officers on the bridge understand their new reality. They are not the invaders. They are the invaded. They have not broken into a fortress. They have sailed into the heart of a naval base and triggered a response from a fleet that was always there, just over the horizon. The tactical objective shifts instantly from conquest to survival. The clean lines of the invasion plan are gone, replaced by the desperate claustrophobic need to escape an encirclement of impossible scale. The human strategic depth was not a line drawn around Earth. It was a net cast across the entire solar system, and now it draws tight. Admiral Torres's voice returns, calm and factual. He addresses the Vorak High Command not as a defender, but as a representative of a broader coalition. He states that humanity's technological leap, the very capabilities that are dismantling the invasion fleet, were not developed in isolation. They required external assistance. This admission is not a confession of weakness. It is a statement of strategic reality, a final piece of the puzzle falling into place for the stunned Vorak commanders. He identifies the source. The Kepler Collective, a civilization from a star system the Vorak had catalogued as uninhabited, made first contact with Earth decades ago. Their concern was not humanity, but the unchecked expansion and brutal methods of the Vorak Empire. They observed the enslavement of species and the obliteration of cultures. They chose to intervene, not with their own military, but by offering a foundation upon which humanity could build its defense. They provided a technology exchange program, a transfer of knowledge that began in the mid-20th century. The technology was not merely advanced. It was fundamentally different. The Kepler Collective's science was based on organic engineering and biological computing. Their systems used living materials that could grow, adapt, and self-repair. Their computational power operated on principles that surpassed binary logic, allowing for the instantaneous calculations behind the phase shift drives and the adaptive shielding. This was not an incremental improvement on Vorak tech. It was a superior paradigm, one the Empire's purely mechanical and digital systems could not compete with or comprehend. This alliance was the secret the Vorak surveillance never uncovered. Their probes scanned for radio transmissions and industrial output, for signs of a civilization following a technological path they recognized. They saw none of that because humanity was building something else entirely, guided by a partner whose existence and capabilities were completely outside Vorak knowledge. The false data stream fed to the Vorak for 80 years was a joint human-Kepler operation, a masterpiece of strategic deception that hid an entire scientific revolution. This explains the impossible weapons. The phase shift capability is a Kepler drive system, manipulating local space-time to transition matter through other dimensions. The adaptive shields are a Kepler bioelectric field, a living matrix that learns and reconfigures energy at a cellular level. The human fleet from the outer system uses Kepler-derived organic hybrid hulls and biological navigation computers. Every technological surprise, every violation of known physics has its origin in this partnership. The core difference is philosophical. The Vorak Empire practiced conquest, extracting technology and resources from subjugated species to fuel its own expansion. Humanity, when offered the same knowledge, chose cooperation. They integrated the Kepler science with their own, creating a hybrid technology neither species could have achieved alone. They built a defense not for domination, but for mutual survival. The victory unfolding around the Vorak fleet is not a human triumph. It is the product of multiple species working toward a common goal. The Vorak now face not a single planet, but a united front. Their entire conquest model, built on isolating and overwhelming individual civilizations, collapses against a network of mutual defense and shared intelligence. The assumption that every species would act in isolated self-interest was their critical blind spot. They expected to fight a lone, fractured world. Instead, they have triggered a response from an alliance they never knew existed, one whose combined strength and technological ingenuity have made their vast armada obsolete in minutes. The doctrine of imperial expansion meets its end not with a bang, but with the silent, efficient application of cooperative power. The Terran Federation makes its first major act one of radical openness. It publishes the complete schematics for the Kepler Human Hybrid FTL drive. The data packages are transmitted across all known communication bands, accessible to any species with the capability to receive them. There are no patents, no licensing fees, no restrictions. The technology that gave humanity its strategic edge is now a gift to the galaxy. This single act shatters the established order. The ability to travel between stars is no longer a privilege controlled by a single power. It becomes a universal right, a tool for connection rather than control. The impact is immediate and profound. The Vorak Empire's hyperspace corridors, once the only reliable paths for interstellar travel, become obsolete. The complex network of military checkpoints and toll stations that lined these routes is rendered useless. The Empire's primary source of economic and political power, its stranglehold on galactic transit, evaporates overnight. The maps of known space, once defined by these fixed monopolized lanes, are completely redrawn. Now any ship with a hybrid drive can plot a direct, unmonitored course to any star. The concept of controlling territory through the control of movement is finished. This reflects the core of humanity's technological philosophy. Where the Vorak hoarded advancements to maintain dominance, humanity shares them to foster mutual advancement. The goal is not to be the strongest species in the galaxy, but to elevate the entire galactic community. Security is no longer seen as a product of individual might, but of collective stability and prosperity. This principle guides every decision, creating a foundation of trust that the Vorak Empire never possessed. The integration of Kepler organic technology with traditional mechanical systems becomes the new standard. Ships are no longer built. They are grown. Hulls repair themselves. Computational systems use biological processors that learn and adapt. Power cores draw energy from subspace through a symbiotic relationship with living crystals. This hybrid approach produces capabilities that pure mechanical science could not achieve. It is a testament to the power of combining different forms of knowledge, of finding strength in synthesis rather than purity. The physical remnants of the old empire are repurposed. Massive Vorak shipyards, once dedicated to producing instruments of war, are converted into research stations. Their immense construction bays now hold experimental drives and prototype exploration vessels. Orbital fortresses become trade hubs, their defensive grids replaced by docking clamps and cargo transfer systems. The very infrastructure built for conquest is systematically transformed into a network for collaboration and commerce. The symbols of fear are remade into beacons of opportunity. This transformation changes the geography of power. Strategic choke points, which factions once fought to control, lose their meaning. In their place, trade hubs flourish at the intersections of new, freely chosen travel routes. These are not fortified stations, but open markets, where a dozen species can be seen negotiating agreements and exchanging goods. The economy shifts from one based on extracted resources to one driven by innovation and shared knowledge. The flow of information becomes more valuable than the control of territory. A generational divide emerges within Vorak society. The older leadership, those who built their identities on imperial supremacy, struggle to adapt. They view the new galaxy with suspicion and resentment, seeing the loss of their privileged position as a catastrophe. Their children, however, experience a different reality. They grow up in a multi-species environment, playing with human and Kepler youngsters, learning in integrated schools. To them, diversity is not a threat or a novelty. It is simply the normal state of the universe. They embrace the collaborative spirit, often to the dismay of their elders. This cultural shift supercharges scientific progress. Research is no longer a competitive race between isolated empires. It becomes a collaborative effort across species boundaries. A breakthrough in materials science on a human world is immediately shared with Kepler biologists and Vorak engineers, leading to applications none could have discovered alone. The pace of innovation accelerates exponentially, solving problems that had plagued civilizations for centuries. Diseases are cured, environmental restoration projects begin on poisoned worlds, and the understanding of the universe itself deepens. Technological progress ceases to be a zero-sum game. The old model where one species' gain was another's loss is replaced by a new paradigm. Advancements are measured by how many they benefit, not by how much power they concentrate. The galaxy learns that collaboration, not competition, is the true engine of discovery. The shared FTL drive was not just a piece of technology. It was the key that unlocked this new way of existing, proving that a rising tide truly does lift all ships. The sealed doors of the Imperial Archives slide open for the first time in 1,000 years. Cross-species teams of historians, xenobiologists, and engineers pass through. They are met not with dusty scrolls but with perfectly preserved data crystals and interactive holographic records. The air is cool, processed to protect the vast repository of knowledge the Vorak Empire amassed. The scale is overwhelming. Row upon row of crystalline storage units stretch into the darkness, each containing the complete cultural, technological, and biological record of a conquered world. This is not a library. It is a mausoleum of civilizations, a trophy room of a millennium of conquest. The teams begin their work, They access the primary logs. The records are brutally efficient. They catalog technologies not by their scientific principles but by their utility to the Empire. An entry for a species gifted with advanced bioengineering details not their cultural achievements, but the optimal methods for pacifying their population and repurposing their laboratories for weapons research. Another file describes a civilization's mastery of sustainable energy, followed by a tactical report on the orbital bombardment that wiped out their cities to secure the power source. The knowledge is vast, but it was all extracted through violence and subjugation. It is a history written by the victor, detailing the spoils without acknowledging the cost. The archivists uncover the personal logs. These are the records the Empire never intended to be seen. They contain footage of species being marched into slave camps, their cities burning in the background. Audio logs of Vorak officers discussing pacification quotas and population control measures. Detailed lists of cultural artifacts designated for destruction to accelerate assimilation. The sheer volume of data is staggering. It paints a picture not of glorious expansion, but of systematic cultural genocide on a galactic scale. The names of species lost to time begin to emerge from the data streams, their stories preserved only by their conquerors. Human-led teams take point on the reconstruction effort. They work with linguists from a dozen council species to decode lost languages. They use genetic archives to model the biology of extinct life forms. Architects study city plans, trying to understand urban layouts and social structures from the blueprints of ruined metropolises. The goal is not to recreate these cultures as museum pieces, but to understand them as they were, to give a voice back to the silenced. It is a massive multi-generational project, the largest archaeological and historical effort ever undertaken. Devastated worlds become the focus of restoration. The archives provide planetary surveys from before the Vorak arrival. Teams of ecologists and terraforming engineers use these baselines to guide their work. They reseed forests on planets scoured by orbital mining. They reintroduce animal species from genetic samples stored in the vaults. They work to cleanse atmospheres poisoned by industrial processing. The effort is a collaboration between dozens of species, each contributing their unique expertise to heal the wounds of the past. It is a physical, tangible repudiation of the Empire's extractive model. The true cost of Vorak imperialism becomes a quantifiable statistic. The archives allow for a precise body count. They list the names of systems depopulated, the tonnage of resources stolen, the square kilometers of forest burned. The numbers are so large they become abstract, yet each digit represents a life ended, a culture erased. This data is compiled into official reports that are presented to the Galactic Council. They serve as an irrefutable, permanent record of the Empire's brutality, a necessary anchor for the new galactic order to prevent such horrors from ever happening again. This process forces a confrontation with uncomfortable truths. For the Vorak people, it means acknowledging that their prosperity was built on the suffering of others. For the member species of the Council, it means accepting that their own safety often came from looking away while the Empire consumed their neighbors. There is no easy path through this history. The archives do not allow for comforting myths or selective memory. They demand a full accounting, no matter how painful. The purpose of the archives is fundamentally transformed. They cease to be a tool of conquest, a database of plunder. They become an instrument of healing. The information is used to locate descendants of displaced populations, to return stolen cultural artifacts, to educate new generations about the dangers of unchecked power. The knowledge that was once wielded as a weapon is now used to build a more just and stable galaxy. It is the ultimate repurposing of the Empire's legacy. Galactic history is being rewritten. The single narrative of Vorak dominance is shattered. In its place, a mosaic of perspectives emerges. The stories of the conquered, the enslaved, and the extinct are given equal weight to the Imperial chronicles. School children on 100 worlds now learn not just about the Vorak fleet, but about the cultures it destroyed. History becomes a complex, multi-voiced conversation, rather than a simple story of winners and losers. This new understanding fosters a deeper empathy and a collective resolve to protect the diversity that makes the galaxy rich. The past is no longer a weapon. It is a lesson. Earth's leadership initiates a consolidation of the new interstellar order. They propose the formal creation of the Terran Federation, a governing body with its core principles rooted in the cooperative model that defeated the Vorak. Its charter is drafted and ratified, establishing a framework built not on territorial control but on mutual benefit and shared security. This signals a definitive end to the period of transition and uncertainty, replacing the fractured galactic landscape with a stable, centralized authority designed to prevent the rise of another empire. The former territories of the Vorak Empire present a monumental challenge. These are not blank slates but complex, wounded regions with fractured infrastructures and populations conditioned by a millennium of authoritarian rule. The Federation establishes restructuring commissions for each sector, tasked with dismantling the old imperial administrative machinery. They face resistance from entrenched Vorak bureaucrats and the complicated logistics of integrating dozens of subjugated species into a new political system. The work is slow, methodical, and requires a delicate touch to avoid reigniting old conflicts. Human engineers are deployed throughout these territories. They do not work alone. They are paired with Vorak technicians who possess an intimate understanding of the systems they built. Together, they survey massive military installations, orbital shipyards, planetary shield generators, weapons research facilities. Their job is not to destroy but to repurpose. A dreadnought construction bay is retrofitted to produce civilian freighters. A planetary defense grid is recalibrated to manage atmospheric weather control. A communications array used for military command is rewired to serve as an interstellar information network. The tools of war are systematically converted into instruments of peace and prosperity. The Federation's guiding principle is mutual protection and knowledge sharing. Membership is offered voluntarily, and the benefits are immediately clear. Civilizations gain access to the shared FTL technology, the hybrid scientific databases, and the collective security guarantee of the entire Federation. There is no coercion. Neighboring systems, having witnessed the fall of the Empire and the stability offered by the new model, petition to join. The Federation grows not through conquest, but through attraction. Its borders expanding as more species choose cooperation over isolation. A critical, non-negotiable element is embedded within the Federation's security apparatus. Monitoring systems are established to prevent any regression to conflict-based models. These are not weapons pointed outward, but sophisticated early warning networks designed to detect the rise of militaristic ideologies, the hoarding of strategic resources, or the development of restricted technologies. The goal is to identify and neutralize threats to the cooperative order before they can gain momentum. It is a permanent safeguard against the cultural amnesia that could allow another empire to emerge. The resolution is the establishment of a sprawling cooperative network that replaces the old fear-based dominance. The galaxy is rewired. Trade routes flourish based on economic need, not strategic advantage. Research is conducted openly across species lines. Disputes are settled in council chambers, not in deep space. The constant background anxiety of imperial aggression is gone. A new normal sets in, one where communication and collaboration are the default methods of interaction. Peace ceases to be a temporary state, a fragile ceasefire between conflicts. It becomes the baseline condition for galactic society. It is engineered into the infrastructure, encoded into the laws, and taught in the schools. The Terran Federation does not just maintain peace. It builds a society where peace is the most stable and logical outcome, making the very concept of large-scale war not just forbidden, but fundamentally obsolete. The energy once spent on conquest is now channeled into building a future for all. A simple plaque stands within a chamber deep inside a classified military archive. It is not a grand monument. Its inscription is spare, its words precise. It states the truth behind the conflict history would call the 6-Minute War. It does not celebrate a battle. It honors the century of patience that preceded it, the long, silent preparation that made the violent outcome both swift and unnecessary. The memorial acknowledges the cost on both sides. It lists the names of the Vorak crews lost in the brief, decisive engagement, the soldiers who followed their orders into a trap they could not comprehend. It also honors the generations of human scientists, engineers, and strategists who worked in absolute secrecy, dedicating their lives to a defense that might never be needed. The inscription makes no distinction between the sacrifices. It presents them as a single tragic toll, extracted by the failure of diplomacy and the horrors of imperial ambition. The carved words explain the core strategic reality. Earth's victory was not achieved in 6 minutes of combat. It was secured through 78 years of meticulous analysis and construction. The inscription reveals that humanity's greatest weapon was foreknowledge. Their strongest defense, a complete understanding of their enemy's capabilities and intentions. The war, when it finally came, was not a fight for survival. It was a controlled demonstration, a preordained conclusion to a conflict that had already been won through intelligence and preparation. This understanding transforms the site's purpose. It becomes a place of pilgrimage for multiple species. Human cadets visit to study the principles of strategic deterrence. Kepler scholars come to contemplate the long-term fruits of cooperation. For many younger Vorak, it is a required stop to understand the folly of the old ways, to see the end result of a philosophy built on conquest. The memorial does not glorify the past. It interrogates it. For the older Vorak leadership, the visit is a different experience. They stand before the plaque and confront the full weight of their legacy. They see their century of planning reduced to a paragraph on a wall. Their mighty armada remembered only as a statistic in a failed campaign. They must face the names of the crews they sent to their deaths, and the irrefutable proof that their entire worldview was based on a catastrophic miscalculation. The quiet of the chamber amplifies their reckoning. The resolution the memorial offers is one of transformation. It symbolizes the galaxy's shift from a model of conquest to one of cooperation. The plaque itself is a product of this new era, its text drafted by a multi-species committee. It stands not as a human trophy, but as a galactic artifact, a shared marker of a collective turning point. It represents the hard-won understanding that peace is not a passive state. It is an active achievement, a condition that must be built, maintained, and defended with as much ingenuity and resolve as any war. The lesson is clear and permanent. Lasting coexistence does not happen by accident. It requires foresight, preparation, and the unwavering commitment to create a reality where conflict is the least desirable option. The galaxy learns that the most profound victories are those that prevent violence altogether, that the highest form of strength is the wisdom to make war unnecessary. The memorial ensures this lesson is not forgotten, anchoring the new galactic age in the solemn memory of the path that led to its creation. It is a reminder written not in stone, but in the altered fate of billions. The century that separated the Vorak invasion plan from its execution created two entirely different strategies. The Vorak built a perfect weapon. Humanity built a perfect understanding. Their greatest asset was not a new gun or a stronger shield, but a deep, patient comprehension of their enemy's entire operational doctrine. They understood that victory would be decided not in the first 6 minutes of combat, but in the 78 years of preparation that came before it. The Vorak Empire fell to a new form of warfare. Their doctrine of overwhelming force met a strategy of meticulous counter-mobilization. Every element of their plan was anticipated and a specific countermeasure was developed and deployed. Their technological advantages were mapped, their tactical playbooks were studied, and their command structure was analyzed until they became predictable. The humans did not match the Vorak strength for strength. They built a system designed to exploit every weakness, turning the Empire's greatest weapons into its most critical vulnerabilities. Humanity transformed surveillance into their primary defensive tool. They did not just detect the Vorak spy probes, they monitored them for decades, intercepting every data transmission and building a comprehensive intelligence profile. This systematic analysis provided a complete picture of Vorak capabilities and intentions. They knew the invasion was coming. They knew the exact force composition, and they knew the planned objectives. This intelligence advantage allowed them to prepare a response that was not reactive, but predetermined. Deception became a key strategic weapon. The humans maintained a public facade of technological stagnation and political disunity. They fed this false narrative directly to the Vorak surveillance networks, creating a controlled information stream that confirmed every imperial assumption. The Vorak based their entire invasion plan on this manufactured reality, believing they faced a primitive and divided world. This deception allowed humanity to develop and build their true capabilities in complete secrecy, transforming a potential weakness into their most decisive advantage. The framework for peace was built alongside the tools for war. While developing weapons to defeat the Vorak fleet, human strategists were also drafting the legal and administrative structures for a post-imperial galaxy. They prepared the surrender terms, the territorial reorganization plans, and the integration protocols years before the first shot was fired. This foresight ensured that the military victory had an immediate political resolution. allowing for a swift transition from conquest to peaceful cooperation without a power vacuum or prolonged instability. Traditional military doctrine failed against this long-term planning. Armies and fleets are designed to fight the last war, to engage an enemy that operates within a known set of rules and expectations. The Vorak prepared for a conventional space battle against a technologically inferior foe. They were completely unprepared for an adversary whose strategy was measured in generations, not battles, and whose primary weapons were intelligence and patience. Their entire military philosophy was rendered obsolete before the engagement even began. The ultimate victory was making the war itself unnecessary. The 6-minute engagement was not the victory. It was the final redundant proof of a victory that had already been achieved. The real victory was the century of work that created a situation where conflict was the least logical option for the Vorak, and when they chose it anyway, their defeat was absolute and immediate. The goal was never to win a fight, but to build a reality where fighting was a futile gesture. This redefined the galaxy's power structure. The old model of fear-driven dominance, where stronger civilizations conquered weaker ones, collapsed. It was replaced by a system of mutual benefit, where security and prosperity were achieved through cooperation and shared advancement. Species no longer sought to hoard power, but to integrate into a network that offered greater stability and opportunity for all members. The primary currency of influence shifted. Extracted resources and controlled territories became less valuable than shared knowledge and collaborative research. A technological breakthrough from one species could benefit the entire galactic community, accelerating progress for everyone. The flow of information, the exchange of ideas, and the pooling of scientific talent became the new measures of a civilization's strength and contribution. The galaxy learned that true power lies not in what you take from others, but in what you can build together. Across the former Vorak territories, daily life transformed at every level. Cross-species collaboration became routine. In orbital shipyards, Vorak engineers now worked alongside human technicians, their combined expertise retrofitting old military vessels into civilian transports. On the surface of colony worlds, multi-species civic boards met to plan infrastructure projects. Their debates focused on resource allocation and public works instead of military objectives. The fundamental rhythm of society changed from preparing for conflict to building for a shared future. The generational divide became a defining feature of the new normal. Older Vorak officers and administrators, their identities forged in the crucible of imperial supremacy, moved through this new world as ghosts. They attended council meetings where their suggestions were weighed against those of species they once considered inferior. They had to request resources from bureaucratic systems they did not control. The loss of status was a constant, quiet trauma, a dismantling of the social hierarchy that had given their lives meaning and purpose. For the younger generation, this new reality was simply the world they inherited. Vorak children attended integrated schools, their classrooms filled with the varied forms and sounds of a dozen species. They learned galactic history from multiple perspectives, studied hybrid technologies, and formed friendships without the weight of ancient grievances. They did not see cooperation as a political concession. They saw it as the fundamental logical way to exist. Diversity was not an abstract concept to them. It was the face of their classmates and the composition of their neighborhoods. Scientific progress accelerated at an unprecedented rate. Research stations, many converted from old Vorak military outposts, became hubs of explosive discovery. A breakthrough in energy conversion by a Kepler scientist would be immediately applied to material science by a Vorak engineer, leading to applications a human theorist had only imagined. These collaborative discoveries were impossible under the old conquest model, where knowledge was hoarded and research was directed solely toward military applications. The free exchange of ideas unlocked potentials that had been stifled for centuries. Trade networks expanded without the shadow of military enforcement. Freighters moved along new transit routes, their holds filled with goods from 100 worlds. They docked at bustling trade hubs that had once been orbital fortresses, their defensive grids replaced by cargo handling systems and open markets. Commerce was no longer a function of controlled extraction but of voluntary exchange. The economic incentive for peace became stronger than any profit gained through conflict, binding the galaxy together through mutual interest. Resistance persisted in remote sectors. Isolated Vorak factions, often led by former military officers who refused the surrender terms, holed up in abandoned installations. They staged minor acts of sabotage against Federation supply lines and broadcast anti-cooperation propaganda. They clung to the Imperial identity, viewing the new galactic order as a temporary weakness to be overcome. Their efforts were more symbolic than strategic, a faint echo of a dead empire's ideology. Time and demonstrated benefit proved to be the most effective tools against this resistance. As former slave worlds flourished under Federation protection, their economies growing and their cultures reviving, the appeal of isolation faded. As the children of the resistors came of age in a galaxy of opportunity, the old grudges lost their power. The tangible rewards of peace, prosperity, security, and technological advancement slowly eroded the foundations of dissent. The galaxy learned the hard lesson through lived experience. Coexistence produced stability, innovation, and growth. Domination produced only temporary control followed by inevitable collapse. The new model did not require everyone to agree, but it made cooperation the most rational and beneficial path for any civilization. The choice was no longer between different forms of conflict, but between participation in a thriving community or irrelevance on its periphery. A new age solidified, defined by a simple, powerful principle. Conflict was no longer managed through deterrence. It was prevented through preparation. The massive resources once poured into building fleets were now invested in building understanding. Shared scientific databases, cross-cultural exchange programs, and interstellar communication networks. The goal was to identify and address problems before they could escalate into threats. Peace was no longer a pause between wars. It was the permanent engineered state of the galaxy, maintained not by weapons but by the collective decision to prioritize a shared future over a segregated past. The 6-minute battle ended a 1,000-year empire. But the real victory came from the century of preparation that made the fight unnecessary. Earth's defense proved that the strongest outcome is avoiding conflict through intelligence and foresight. Humanity's long game of strategic patience and alliance building dismantled the Vorak threat before their fleet ever fired a shot. The galaxy now moves forward as a cooperative network, not a conquered territory. This new age of collaboration, built on shared knowledge rather than seized power, stands as the ultimate result of choosing preparation over provocation.